Shall we start, ma'am?
Yes, ma'am.
What beautiful smiling faces on the screen. God bless you. Good morning to yet another beautiful rainy day. We are on the 5th day of a faculty development program today. Research and development is a broad category describing the entity of basic research, applied research, and development activities. In general, research and development means systematic activities in order to increase knowledge and use this knowledge when developing new products, processes, and services. I, Susan Shibu, welcome you all to the 5th day of the 8-day faculty development program on pedagogy and research skills development, hosted by Amity School of Languages here at Amity University, Maharashtra. So, a wholehearted welcome to all the enthusiastic participants who are here eagerly waiting to a very renowned and much sought after speaker of the day. We have with us our head of the institute, Dr. Manjari Vaidya, again eagerly awaiting to welcome you all. So her presence here is enough to send the message across to you all that we value your participation, enthusiasm, and your wholehearted comments and responses in full quantum. Here, I would also like to mention about a co-convener, Dr. Swati Bise, who is very rarely visible on the screen, but she is the person or the power or the impetus along with Manjari ma'am. So I thank them from our end, and also the IT department, Shashank sir. These people really need a special mention. So I am doing the job to consolidate their support here. Now to welcome our speaker, a much prolific speaker and the chief guest of today's morning session, I would invite Snehal to welcome Sachin sir. Before that, I would like to give you a brief introduction to the pretty face on the screen, that is Snehal Godbole. Snehal Godbole is the assistant professor teaching in the German department of Amity School of Languages. Young, enthusiastic people we have in our department, she is one among them, and with a 2 years experience. So these are the people that keeps the department very vibrant, active, and makes us feel even younger. So over to you, Snehal, for welcoming us, sir.
Thank you so much, Susan ma'am. Now, once again, good morning and a very warm welcome to one and all. Today is the 5th day of our FTP, and I would like to take the privilege to introduce our speaker for today's session, Dr. Sachin Loveday. Dr. Loveday sir is known for his research work in the field of English language and literature. He holds a PhD in English from Savitribai Phule Pune University. Currently, he is working as Associate Professor in English at the Department of English, University of Mumbai. He has also been recognized as Research Guide by the University of Mumbai. He is the coordinator for Indo-Canadian Studies Center at University of Mumbai. Apart from that, Sir has contributed to the development of syllabus for various programs in the fields of languages, including MA with research in English. He has been the member of Board of Studies in English for various renowned institutions. He has published and presented many research papers in many journals, seminars, and conferences, including one on researching in English language teaching. Sir has also been awarded fellowships by many well-known universities abroad. Um, Sir, it gives me immense pleasure to welcome you on behalf of Amity School of Languages, Amity University, Maharashtra. Please note in today's session, Sir will be guiding us about research methodology in language and literature. All right. So before we begin with the session, I have an announcement to make. The participants, please note that towards the end of the session, we will have a 15 to 20 minutes question and answer session. So I would like to request you all to please post your questions on the chat box. And I now request Sir to please begin with the session. Over to you, Sir.
Okay, before Sir begins, I would just like to request, there is a slight correction. Uh, Please do not post your queries or questions while the session is on, because the pop-up sound will disturb the speaker. So please contain that towards the end of the session, and once we are coming to the closure, please put in your queries. Thank you so much. Yes, ma'am, you can go ahead.
Thank you, Snehal. I just want to make sure before we begin if I'm audible enough and if I have to be visible.
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Yeah, because the camera is disabled. So I just wanted to know if the camera will be off while I make presentation.
So your choice, but we would love to see you again.
Even I would love to show because I get to see and I get to interact with people. Unfortunately, the camera is like the video is disabled, so I could if I could request the technical team to enable the video or enable the camera.
Okay. Shashank sir?
So it's enabled. I mean, it's allowed for you can turn it on.
Yeah, because it doesn't show that option. It says that you can share your video when you are done screen sharing. So there are only two possibilities, like either I share my screen or I share the camera. How do I go about it?
Yourself,
No,
sir.
sir.
Whatever is-
You just have to click the camera icon on top.
It is disabled actually.
Okay. No, it's from our side. It's allowed. You have all the permissions at the moment. So I guess
Sorry
yeah.
to
That's
interrupt. Sorry to interrupt, sir. You must be using from browser, right? Teams?
Yes, yes.
Huh,
Yes,
that's why. From browser, it's not allowed. When we share the screen, we cannot switch on the video. It's only allowed through apps. So that's why.
okay.
Maybe.
So now because I've stopped sharing screen, I can at least I'm visible.
So,
All right,
whichever is convenient to you. We are okay with both.
yeah.
We choose our hand, so
Thank you.
yourself, and
So
please be comfortable. We are okay with either of it.
in that case, may I request Snehal to share the PPT from her side, so I could see the participants as well as I could
Yes.
also refer to the presentation.
Absolutely.
Is that possible, Snehal? Yeah.
Yes, sir. I have done that. I
Thank you.
hope the screen is visible now.
Yes, sir.
Yes, it's very visible. Thank you. Thank you very much, Snehal. Yeah. Uh, yeah, if we could have full screen view.
Yeah, sure, sir. Just a second.
Yeah, while Snell is busy arranging things for me, I just would like to take this, one fleeting moment to thank the entire faculty, of Amity University, Mumbai. To begin with, I'd like to thank the Honorable Vice Chancellor of Amity University and all the authorities of the university. And on top of everything, I thank Dr. Manjiri Vaidya, the head of institution Amity School of Languages, her very vibrant colleague, Dr. Swati Bise, and two very smiling faces who greeted me this morning, Madam Susan and um, Madam Snehal. Uh, all the participants, I would rather use the word colleagues who have joined this FDP from different parts of the state and different parts of the country. A warm welcome to everyone. And I hope that next 2 hours are going to be interactive. 2 hours of learning, 2 hours of sharing, and 2 hours of caring. Having said all these things, I must begin by saying that though I am not a butterfly eater, I have got butterflies in my stomach at present. And it's simply because meeting a vibrant community of teachers, researchers across the states and across the universities is not a very simple task. I'm enthusiastic, I'm quite curious, but at the same time, I also have the anxieties. My two fears are, number one, the fear and the ghost that I have that haunts me all the time is that will I be relevant to what I am presenting before the audience? And second is that will I be audible and visible at times? Because technology is something that can always take you for a ride and can shock you, surprise you. So with these two admissions, with these two confessions, I'd like to begin this session. As all of you know that the title of this presentation, I would rather avoid the word presentation. The title of this session is Research Methodology in Literature and Language. So before we jump into this, sea of, a topic, because research methodology is not something, and let me not fool myself and let us not be fooled by this very idea that in 2 hours we can actually find the length and the width and the depth of the area called research methodology, and that too in literature and language. So I am definitely not going to do that. I'm going to just focus on a few areas which I think are very important for researchers and for the faculty who are interested in taking up research projects. So let us begin with a few questions before we actually take this journey. So let's move to the next slide and see what questions do I have to which I am pondering over. Snail, could we have next slide, please?
Sir, the flow of the session, right?
Yes, the flow of the session. Thank you. Yeah. Oh, this is my original plan that I actually thought, I would begin with breaking ice for myself. And then we could talk about, method and methodology and then areas of research in literary studies, then talking about research methods, if there is anything new that we should be discussing, and moving on to research areas in language studies, talking about research methods in language studies, if there is anything new, and then finally we have our session moderator Snail, who would be then leading us in Q&A, that is question and answer session. So that's what originally my plan was, but Snail will show you in the next slide that what exactly I really have come up with. Exactly. Now this is going to be my flow of the session. You are going to be on a roller coaster ride with me, and whatever I have said in a logical manner is just not going to work, We are just going to have this experience, and at the end of the session, if all of us survive, we will have question and answers. So I'm going to use this Jugaad method in order to interact with you. I might just brush aside the kind of line of thinking that I've got, or the line of points that I've got to discuss with you, and take something that makes more sense during our discussion. Yes, so let's move to the next slide and see what we could have in this. This is one question that I think I have for myself and I have for you. Like, does knowing what research methodology is really matter? Or can we just have this attitude, yeah, let's go with the flow, let's not bother about research methodology, let me start working on it, and then finally by and by I'll find what research methodology I am actually adopting. What is your answer to this? I am curious to know if this is how we should be thinking. Like, what is the purpose? Why should we know research methodology at all? Like, can we not do the research without even knowing what research methodology is? So this is one question that I'm pondering over. And I have this question for all the participants and those who are, who take interest in research. I'm sure all the 20 or 200 vibrant participants who have joined this program must have joined with the motivation and with that intrinsic and internal desire to get better ideas and hang of research in language and literature. So this is my question to everyone, and either you could respond to that by unmuting yourself if that option is available. Snail would guide me on that better. And if not, then we could also have your responses in the inbox. I just would like to know from you, do you think there is the word research methodology and the word research methods, they are synonymous? Like, they go hand in hand. Like, either you say I'm using this research method, and sometimes I just shift from that expression and I say I'm using this research methodology. So is it one and the same? That is my question to 157 vibrant participants, plus it must be more. Yeah, that is my first question. Would anyone be interested in responding to this, or putting your comments in the chat box? Snail, please guide me.
Yes, sir. We are getting messages in the chat box.
Right. All right.
Dr. are saying yes. She's saying yes.
Yeah. Right. Now I also have access to chat box now. So thank you, Snehal. Well, yes, we could see responses coming from various members, and most of these have a positive response to this, that yes, we do need to have research method. Like, it does matter, research methodology does matter in doing research. And the question about are these one and the same, I have Dr. Ravindra Hazare saying that not at all same, or they're not same. One is narrow and second is broad. Okay, that's good. Thank you, Dr. Hazare. Also, Dr. Shalini Mathur says that it's slightly different. Dr. Lavanya says the research methodology helps in making more organized and complete it in time. Thank you. Thank you, Kshitija, for adding to these comments. I believe that most of us are on the same page, that all of us know it very well, that research methodology and research methods, they are interrelated, but they are not one and the same, right? And that is, I think, where we begin our literacy about research, like, and help understand that these are two different terms, though they are very much related to each other. Dr. Chodi Ganji, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrongly. Please forgive me. says that research methods come under research methodology, which is true. Thank you very much. And also we have response from Pawandeep Kaur, who says that of course we can research without knowing method, but knowing your method, you are more guided and organized. Thank you. All right, so that's fantastic. Thank you very much for your quick responses. I know it's like beginning your morning with a cup of tea or a cup of coffee is a very good idea, but then beginning your morning talking about research methodology is something very rare, but it's happening, and I'm very glad that all of you are responding to this. Yes. Now, as we have got all of us on the same page, and we all agree that research methodology and research methods are different from each other in the sense one includes the other. One is an umbrella term, whereas the other is being absorbed into that. So if you go by, and I don't really want to do this, I don't want to give you one or two definitions and say that these are the universal definitions. If you just surf online, and you'll find that there is no scarcity of literature on what research methodology means. But here I just have one simple definition, that is, research methodology is the specific procedures or techniques used to identify, select, process, and analyze information about a topic. Right? Now, which is different from research methods. Research methods are those specific procedures, or those research method is a particular approach that you use to carry out your research, which is one component, which is just one component of research methodology. Now, why am I discussing this at all? I just wanted to bring it to your notice that the range, range that the topic research methodology has, it's quite wide. And I have seen in the last 5 days you have touched upon many of those aspects related to research methodology, like the very aspect of the process of doing research, the process of writing your research has already been dealt with. I think it's very fresh on your minds. Dr. Madhvi Nikam talked about this, and it's also very much a part of research methodology. In the sessions to come, you also have sessions on you have sessions on interdisciplinary research, which again will fall under the same category. So as I said at the beginning, and I repeat, that I do not wish to fool myself by believing that I'm going to touch upon each and every aspect of research methodology in 2 hours. Let's not do that. And let's be fair with the expectations of the organizers, the convener, who has trusted me with this responsibility, and focus only on something that could be relatively new, relatively fresh, and relatively doable in the given time frame. So the question that we have is that when and where do we feel the need of research methodology? And I have a few answers. Obviously, you can add to these and share your ideas. But I personally feel that the moment you start writing your research proposal, the first question comes is that what research method do I mention, or what is going to be my research methodology? Research methodology is your why, it is your how. Like, how are you going to do what you're going to do? So this how part is what you have to begin with when you are writing your research proposal. Be an MPhil research proposal, be it a PhD research proposal, be it a research project proposal for a major research or minor research project, funded by the university or funded by UGC, right? So at all these levels, we are going to have this question, and especially when you are writing a research article, right? You have to think of a research methodology which is going to guide you, right? Which is going to, it's not only guiding you, but it is also going to guide your audience. It is going to guide your readers as to how exactly you have approached a particular topic, whether what you have done is it's reliable, what you have done is valid, because the validity of my research, the reliability of my findings or research becomes solid only when I adopt or I use methods, techniques, tools, strategies which have been time tested. Right? And we have to give a certain justification for anything that we do. It's not just because I liked Shakespeare and I liked reading, plays, the tragedies by Shakespeare. I want to do my research on Shakespeare. I'm really very interested in Shakespearean language, so I just want to do my research, and I want to write my research paper, write my research article on Shakespeare. Fine, but before that, you have to ask your this very important question: like, am I equipped to deal with this as a research topic and research area? And that is something that our research methodology guides us, right? So now we will do a little exercise. Let's little warm up, since it's morning time and all of you are like in like this morning mode. So let's do this little warm up. What I have for you is little quiz where I'll request all of you to click on the link which will be shared by uh, the moderator, Madam Snehal, on the chat box. Please visit this link, and there are two slides which are waiting for you. Could we have the next slide, please? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Shashank sir, I don't have access to the chat box. Can you please give me the access?
Even I can, like put the link.
Chat is already enabled.
Yes.
Do we need to? Yeah, I'll just post the link myself.
Sure. Thank you, sir.
I've done it from my side, but if I hope this link is
Yes.
available.
Yes, the link is available. Sir.
Great.
Yes. Yes.
So if you visit this link, there are two things that are waiting for you. What I would like to know from you is a response to the first one, that is, I have a basic understanding of, and then you would probably find a few options, and I just want you to choose those options, or like kind of put it on the scale of 1 to 5. And then if you finish that and move to the second slide, which we will do a little later, I will request you to only to stick to the first slide. We will have discussion, and then we move to the second slide of Mentimeter. In the meantime, what I will do is I'll share the screen so that we can all see. I'll share the screen. We can see the results. That's 13 people have already joined. They have started responding, and we have 100 and like plus 150 plus participants. I'm sure that each one of you will be able to respond to this in the next 1 minute, and see how surprising the results are. Snehal, could you stop sharing the screen from your side for just 1 minute so that we could see the results?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I hope the result screen is visible.
Not yet, sir. Yeah, it's visible.
It's visible, right? So now what I had asked was, these few points, that I have a basic understanding of meaning of research methodology. Uh, then types of research methods, then methods of data or data collection, then methods of data or data analysis, and concepts such as research question, research problem, hypothesis, thesis statement, objectives. And I can see that most of the participants are very well versed when it comes to methods of data collection and the basic concepts like research question or research problem, hypothesis, or thesis statement, and meaning of research methodologies too. Like the only, I think, point where we are little below 3 points of the scale, that is types of research methods and methods of data analysis. All right, so 58 participants have responded. I hope the other participants also managed to respond. Let's then move to the second question that we have, and I would like you to respond to the second question. Before that, I just have to make the second question slide available. Yeah. If you now the second question, it's not a question, but it's something that I would like to know from all the participants, that research areas best known to you in literature and language. You could mention any 2 or 3 research areas. That is an option that is available. You can type your response and just share it. So we get to know what are the research areas that are best known to you in literature and language. In order to see this particular slide, you might just have to refresh your page. Fantastic. We have 2 people joining and we have got responses. Let's see. So what I get to see, and we all can see here, is subaltern studies, feminism, critical studies, theories, translation studies, comparative literature. That's good. Let's see if there are many more responses to this. I was also given to understand that the participants are not exclusively from English literature and language background. There are also participants who might be educators, language educators in French and language educators in German. As I know, Snehal herself is assistant professor in German, if I'm not wrong. Right, Snehal?
Yes.
Right. Yeah, and I hope there are some participants who have different, like who teach or who are language educators for different languages.
Yes.
Wow. So looking at the growing word cloud, I can see that there are so many topics that you have come up with, sociolinguists, including language, then language pedagogy and literature. So and such a varied range of topics that you have talked about, research areas that you have talked about in this, whether it is feminist approach, whether it is Dalit literature, whether it is subaltern literature, or it's but 3 expressions have stood out, that is feminism, comparative study, and comparative literature. That's fantastic. Great. 37 responses, 39 responses. Superb. I mean, as I said, this is just going to be a kind of warm-up session where I just wanted, everyone to be wide awake so that the session goes well, and we get to interact with each other or one another in the real sense of the word, though we are stuck by the technological and technical limitations. Great. Now, at one point, I will not be able to even read what you have written. That the letters are becoming tiny, tiny, tiny. That means only 1 or 2 participants have actually thought of that particular expression. But major expression that we can see is translation, comparative studies, and somewhere I could find language or linguistics, cultural studies, and gender studies. That's fantastic. Thank you very much. I will stop sharing my screen. The very point was to, just to get an idea from the participants as to what are the areas in which they consider their research. Cool. So coming back to the discussion. Yes. Thank you very much for helping me to break ice. I hope this has, at least, got you moving a bit and making more curious whether you're going to find answers to some of the questions that you have and you brought to this particular session. Let's move to the next slide and see what we can now, where we can go from here. Well, now, as we already have got these varied topics, now you can easily, find certain compartments under which or in which you can put these topics. Most of the topics that we are studying could be thematic study. Like we are interested in studying the themes and patterns, recurring ideas that a particular work does as far as literature is concerned. Or we could have a structural study of any literary text or a wide range of literary text. A stylistic, what we call is the stylistic approach to a literary text. Then we have critical studies, and you have given me number of options there, right from subaltern studies, feminist approach, then eco-feminist approach or eco-criticism, or psychoanalytical criticism, and which offer you a critical perspective and a way of interpreting literature. This is what we have been doing, and it's quite in place in the last few years. Like if you trace the history of research in literary studies, you'll realize that after 1950s, that the trend of critical studies, that going beyond the conventional way of studying literature, which was what they call it liberal humanism, right? Going beyond liberal humanism and then looking at literature as already and always connected with the society, and the meaning is not something that stays and remains only in the text. There is always interaction. The meaning is always dependent on how you read it, how you interpret it. And so new critical perspectives could give us new dimensions of exploring a work. A writer who once upon a time was celebrated as a great poet or great playwright or a novelist might be brought into question by using a specific theory, like by using probably feminist approach, and say that you have celebrated this writer, but today if you look at it, look at the work from a feminist perspective, you realize that the writer was very much biased, like, and he always preferred to, or give kind of undue advantage to a specific gender in his representation or in his presentation. So these are the questions that could be brought and that could give you a new insight into any literary text, whether it is old or it is a very recent, very fresh text. So that is what critical study has done to our approach, and this is now in vogue wherever you go. When you talk about literature, the research in literature, it is always in terms of, okay, so what is your framework, right? Are you using X angle? Are you using Y angle? Are you using feminist approach? Are you using queer reading or queer approach? Are you using eco-criticism? So these are the questions that are asked to most of the researchers. And I'll tell you one thing, that this is one of the scariest one of the scariest parts of doing research, is that you have to bring in critical theory. And to bring in critical theory, you have to have a very good understanding of that critical theory. So there is a kind of imposition, there is a kind of demand that you have to have a very good understanding of that critical theory to apply it or to kind of use it to read a literary text. Now, this is what I am saying. Snehal and others can correct me if I'm wrong. It's very much in place. We know this. We know that literary studies have, like when we talk about literary studies, these are the perspectives and possibilities that we have to think of. Why am I talking about this? Because we are talking about research methodology, and the question is how. This one part of this how is, how are you analyzing the primary sources that you're using? And the major answer that we have, at least right now, and I've seen this even in the responses that came from the participants, is that critical approach, critical study of a literary text, that is interpretation of a literary text from a critical point of view, right? So that you get a new perspective. Then I'll just kind of move to the next, because these are not the areas that I'm actually going to focus on. There is something else that I want to take this session to. Snell, I'm sorry, could we go back to the earlier slide? Yeah, just for 1 minute, and then we'll come to this slide where I have a few questions and to which I would seek answers from this vibrant group of participants. And please do tell me, Snehal, if I'm running, like, if I'm very fast, and, you can just slow me down by saying that, sir, please, bring it to a sort of average pace so everyone can follow what I'm saying, right? Please do stop me at any point of time. You're most welcome to do that.
Sure. Right now it's perfect.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, and another area which was like a very, like, which could be identified by that very big font, big fat font, that was comparative study. That many of you said that, you do comparative study, or you are interested in comparative study. Then I couldn't find much, but probably biographical studies was a study, is possibly another area which we have in literature in when we explore literary studies. And then you have historical study. I do not know how many of you have actually used a particular method called archival method of doing research in literary studies when it comes to historical studies. And if you dig deeper, you will realize that archival method is not something that is very much popular, or it is not something that which is explored a lot by many people, because archival method of doing research requires you to have a specific set of skills, abilities, and you need to know certain techniques how to go about it. It's not just about taking a particular literary text and studying it from a historical perspective, but it's actually bringing all those documents, or bringing together the documents which sort of give you a better and sort of wider, or say a larger picture of history, or how something was treated in the history. And there you might also find gaps. You might just find that certain things are just not available. There is just no literature available on that. There are no documents. There is no documentation whatsoever. But archival study, or archival approach, a research approach to historical study, can really give you that perspective. I'm just going to skip this part because my focus is going to be on something else. I would like to know now from the participants, how many of you, or which topic that you have suggested falls under the category of reception study? Has anyone suggested something that actually falls under the category of reception study? That you are actually talking about the reception. If there is any, I would love to see in the chat box. If there is anyone who feels that, yeah, either it could be in the chat box if it is enabled by the technical committee, or another possibility is unmuting yourself and commenting quickly, if that is just possible. Snell, will that be a possibility? where the participants could unmute themselves, first raise their hand and then unmute themselves and speak?
Yes,
Yes,
that
sir,
is
it's possible. It's possible, sir. We'll, Shashank, sir,
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
please.
So the participants can just raise their hand by clicking this hand icon, and I'll give them the permission to unmute.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Shubhra Tiwari, for sharing this. And Dr. Shubhra Tiwari says that cultural studies actually does address specific method of responding to that. Uh, Madam Manjula has, she says that gender issues, cross-cultural studies. Again, it's like in a broader sense, it falls under the category of cultural studies. Dr. Lavanya says comparative study literature can fall into this category, the category of reception. Okay, if I may ask to one of the participants who have responded to this, either Dr. Shubhra Tiwari or Dr. Lavanya, if you could, unmute yourself and tell me a little more about how you think of reception study, uh, you know, or what kind of, you know, research method or methodology that comes to your mind when we talk about reception study. How exactly would that be? Either Dr. Lavanya or Dr. Shubhra, if you could respond to this, it would be great. Snehal, I hope I'm not breaking any protocols by, kind of just storming the sessions by asking technical team to, unmute and right.
no,
Apologies in advance.
no, not at all, sir. It's your session. You tell us what to do.
Thank you.
Good
Thank you.
morning,
Thank you
I'm
very much.
Lavanya here. Am I audible?
Yes, Dr. Lavanya, please.
Yeah. While you were giving this thing, what I understand, reception is, it's a kind of a comparison, maybe, how we look at the earlier works and this work. Like one of my own scholar is working on the myth writing and comparing it to the epics. These days, the trend is to, you know, write another work like Amish Tripathi and all these people. So, a kind of a comparison of between the cultures or conveying how it is being presented, how we receive or understand in a modern sense of the ancient texts.
Thank
I
you.
don't know whether I'm being clear or not.
No, absolutely fine. I'm glad that you responded to this request. So thank you very much. Now I'm going to, like bring this
Like,
issue back.
I'm not sure if sorry, I'm not sure if we have to go into the reception theory of Hans Robert, but I'm just wondering if it could be
Yes.
in that.
It's
Yeah.
absolutely fine. Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing. Yes, and also like I could see responses from other participants, especially I could see Madam Ayesha saying how an individual reader responds to a text. Fantastic, Ayesha. I really appreciate the response that you have given and interprets the text. Obviously, we are free to Google and find out more information on reception theory. Like this is not like the old days where we used to sit in the class and if you don't have the textbook, you just have to look at someone else's face. That अरे इसका answer क्या होगा? But you can definitely Google and find out on online, what exactly reception theory is, and I can see people responding to that, and they're just using this platform to share it. Fantastic. My focus, at least part of my focus, is going to be on the reception aspect of it and how exactly we can conduct research. What could be the research methodology? What kind of research methods do we need for this? Is it going to be just the, like what we call in the traditional sense, the kind of literary studies that we do or research we do? We use a particular term for the method that we approach or the approach that we use. We call it library research. That just taking the books, articles and sources and putting them together, reading them and coming up with your own interpretation, or is this going to be something different? And Madam Aisha has given me a very promising response to this, and we are going to talk about this a little later. Yes. Then the next area is ethno narrative method, or which is also, to have an umbrella term, we have a narrative methodology or narrative method. So if you have suggested the topics, or if you have mentioned the topics, ask this question to yourself, like, does my research interest fall under ethno-narrative methodology? Like, can I use ethno-narrative methodology? How will that be useful? Or reception, method of doing research? Has anyone suggested a topic that, or any area that has something to do with the readership culture? If there is any, you can just unmute. I'm extremely sorry for the banging sound in the backdrop. Uh, yeah, please excuse me for that. Yeah, if there is anyone who has suggested a topic that comes very close to what we call readership culture. All right. And then obviously I talked about the archival research methods when we talk about history and creating archives. Now, in this session, my major focus is going to be on the reception, narrative, and readership. So these three aspects are something probably, I won't say the most neglected, but they're definitely the areas which need to be most explored. It's not something that we have explored so far, and probably we are used to only a particular way of doing it, like the way of doing research. We are used to using critical approaches, critical perspectives, and use the frameworks, and then just do the analysis and present our interpretation. But let us see if these are the areas within the framework or within the gamut of what we call literary studies, if this can help us. And also we will talk about language and language pedagogy, if this can be of any help or any use. Let's now quickly move to the next slide and see some topics. And I would ask you to, simple question, if these topics, have the same technique or method of doing research, or you'll have to think of a particular way of doing research in these areas. Topics are quite clear. I hope these are visible, and the font size is not like small. Uh, it doesn't have any problem. It doesn't create any problem in reading. Snehal?
No, sir. No, sir. And actually, the participants can zoom in. They
Oh,
have
great.
that
Yeah.
option.
Oh, great, great, great. All right. I think even I will have that option of zooming, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so let us see the topics, and now I'm going to request one of the participants to unmute and just read the topics. Maybe you can fill in the gaps. I kept these gaps deliberately, knowing the fact that some of the colleagues are from French, department, some are from German department, so they can fill in and they can just put those expressions. For example, code mixing and code switching among dash speakers of dash, like among maybe Indian speakers of English. So that's how I look at it. And probably Snehal might look at it differently, and she may say, okay, like, let me see code switching and code mixing among the German speakers of German, or maybe the Swedish speakers of German, right? Because German is not spoken only in Germany. There are other countries near the neighboring countries where German is spoken, and she might be interested in seeing like how there is code mixing and code switching tendencies in the those speakers in that particular neighborhood. Yeah, so this way you could just look at the topics and tell me if you think that there are any specific ways of doing research in this, if there is any particular approach that you can use. The second topic is students' attitude and motivation in studying dash 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 at the undergraduate level or at the university level. It could be studying literature at the university level. It could be studying um, language at the university level. It could be studying specific genre, specific aspect at the university level. So that is another topic that I have shared with you. I'll request okay, I can request Neil, because she's at present, she's the one face, a smiling face I can see right in front of me on the screen. So if Snail could read the rest of the topics, and in the meanwhile, everyone thinks about it, talks about it, and like talks in the sense, thinks about it, and then shares their ideas. Yeah.
Should I
Okay.
start from
Yes,
the
yes, Neil, please. Yeah, the next one.
third one? Do students learn English better with XYZ method or impact of a certain approach, method, techniques in teaching and or learning of?
Yeah, dash, dash, dash. Okay, why I am giving these topics is just so that we start asking these questions to ourselves. Like, if I have to like really take a question like this and do research, what research methodology do I have to use? What research methods can be handy in doing such research? Like, and do I know about any such topics? Dr. Moshmi Roy Chaudhary shares with us that she says that code mixing, code switching among English speakers of Chhattisgarh. Super, fantastic. Um, yeah, and the next is Indian students' reception of literature in dash dash dash. You could fill in the gap by saying Indian students reception of literature in German, or German literature, or German literature in translation, or Spanish literature, or French literature. Those of you who teach Indian languages, they could also talk about the other Indian languages. For example, the Marathi students reception of, say, Telugu literature in translation. Now, these are the topics, these are the areas probably we may not have given a thought to, that is this something that we can study, is this something that we can do research on. But we have to ask these questions, like, if we have to really conduct research in understanding the reception, the students' reception of something, how do we actually go about it? And I'll come to a very important point why I said this is that like in the last 20 years, like ever since I started teaching, or I entered this very noble profession of uh, interacting with the young generation, I realized that when it comes to English literature, there are certain literary texts, that when you teach these texts in the classroom, neither the teacher nor the students are very comfortable. For in the first place, the teacher is not comfortable, and as a result, the students also become uncomfortable, dealing with that kind of literary text and studying the literary text, especially when it comes to literary text that very vibrantly talks about sexual identity, or it talks about the very sexual relationship between the characters, and there is a specific language that is used, or even there is poetry which uses the kind of language, like whether you're teaching Sylvia Plath, or whether you're teaching Kamla Das, there could be, or other writers, for that matter. When it comes to such writers and such writings, like is there a possibility that we look at the reception, like how the students receive this kind of literature, and is there a problem, and can we address the problem, can we solve the problem, right? Now, if this is the topic, how do I go about it? My question is not the topic, my question is like, how do I go about it? Like, do I know the way out here? And then we move to the last two topics, and I'll request Snehal to read the last two topics for me. Snehal, please.
Yes, sir. So, role of literary journals in the literary system of India. And the next topic is theatre audience of Indian drama in. And we have one answer from Ms. Kshitija. She says that theatre audience of Indian drama in Maharashtra.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Snehal. And thank you, Kshitija, for responding to this. Also, I think Arindam has responded to by saying that, do students learn English better with content-based instruction? That's fantastic, Arindam. Thank you. I'm so sorry. I'm referring to people by their first names. You know, apologies well in advance. If I don't see DR or any before that, I just use the first name, if the thing that I can see on my screen. So my apologies to you if I, do something mischievous by just using first name. Yeah. Also, Amin Khan has said that theater audience in Indian drama in Delhi. That could be very specific, and that's fantastic. Now, all of you have very, enthusiastically responded to these, topics. Our major question is like how do we go about it? Like, if I have to do a research, say, on code mixing and code switching among particular speakers of a particular language, how do I go about it? Like, what is my research methodology? Can I just if there is any answer to this, if anyone wishes to answer, even Snell, feel free to respond to this whenever you feel that yes, I can respond to a question like this. Or anyone in the group, like if you wish to respond, you can raise your hand, and then we could probably get you to unmute yourself and share your ideas. Yeah. So we'll spend at least a couple of minutes on this. I would like to take these views from. Yes, I could see Nisha Ahuja. Uh, yes, Nisha, Madam Ahuja, if you could unmute yourself and.
Good morning,
Very
Nishan,
good.
and we met in this week. You came to our STTP also. It's my privilege to listen to you once again.
Thank you.
Okay, so regarding this code switching and mixing among the, we can take the case study, or we can take the, as I'm part of the engineering college, so we can take engineering students, and the conversation can be observed, or they can we can provide them with the questionnaire where they are using this kind of language where they are mixing two language, let's say Hindi English, or we can take the sample of their chats from, let's say, from the WhatsApp groups where this happens often, and that way we can collect the data, and that way we can go for the analysis of data.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Nisha. And thank you for, kind of going a little out of box to sort of suggest that how exact we can do this, or we can work on this. Very importantly, as you rightly said, that you will work on your what we call primary sources or your data. And to do this, you'll have to use a particular research approach. You'll have to use a particular research method, that is like more of an empirical kind of research, where you're going to go into the field and collect your data and then work on it. But it's not that simple, right? You just go into the field and the data is available, just like you go to a particular tree and plug the leaves. Generally we shouldn't plug the leaves, but yes, it's not that easy and it's not that handy, right? You have to use a particular instrument, you have to use a particular technique in order to do this. As you said, either we could have questionnaires or we could have interviews with students. We could record these interviews and then work on this. So it involves a lot of action. It involves a lot of techniques that you need to know. If you are doing uh, interviews, how exactly you're going to have the structure of your interviews. If you're going to do questionnaires, how exactly you're going to plan your questionnaire. There are certain techniques and there are certain ways that you can do. You can write your questions in the questionnaire. Until and unless you get a hang of it, that how exactly a balanced questionnaire is prepared, there, until unless you do that, you won't be able to really get a very good data. And then the analysis part comes a little later. That would be content analysis that you do by using a particular framework or by using a particular model. That's another thing. But thank you very much, Nisha, Madam Nisha, for sharing that quick thought. Yeah. Besides that, if I think Tashi had, if sorry, Kshitija, Madam Kshitija, if you're there and you had talked about the theater audience of Indian drama in Maharashtra. So would you like to elaborate a bit on this? Like how exactly you can do this research? Like what could be your research methodology to kind of do this kind of research? If you can hear me and if you're there.
Yes, the mic permission has been granted, so you can also unmute and speak.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much, Shashank sir. Yeah, Kshitija, your mic is unmuted. So if you wish to comment on this.
Can you hear, sir? Hear
Yes.
me?
Yes. You're quite clear.
Okay. Thank you, sir. And it's our pleasure to listen you.
Yeah, Kshitija, you just mentioned about theater audience of drama in
I'm
Maharashtra. So
yeah.
do you know how exactly you can go about it? Like what kind of research methodology will you use in order to do this kind of research? What?
So we can take some samples, like we can give some people questionnaires, or we can take their recordings, and we can take their responses by written or audio forms, and we can analyze these things, and we can use certain methodology to analyze this data, and we can go ahead with this.
Okay, thank you, Kshitija. So Kshitija says that it's basically sampling. So new word that has come into our discussion is like basically working on the samples and deciding on sample design, sample size, and how exactly you collect your sample, the manner of collecting sample. So all these things would be very important when you conduct your research in something like this, that you're studying the theater audience reception or their reactions or their attitude or their opinions on Indian drama, say in English, right? So there is another question, like why do you want to do that? You will definitely have a research question, you'll have a research problem to deal with. Like if at all there are going to be, if there are certain ways of, there are certain plays in like which come to the theater, like why only certain types of plays come to the theater, why only certain themes actually occur in the theater when it comes to English, or drama in English when it comes to drama in Hindi. So asking these questions probably would really, or finding answers to these questions would take you to the audience, like the kind of culture that we have, the audience culture that we have. And so this would be more of an empirical study where you have to collect your samples and then you analyze the samples. Yeah. So once again, thank you very much for sharing that. So this discussion has brought us to the point where we realize one thing, that we have to go beyond the kind of limited framework of doing research, and only those research methods which we are used to, or which probably conventionally have been passed on to us. There are new research methodologies, there are new research methods, approaches that we need to use, adopt to suit our purpose and explore these areas. So some of these areas are what I'm going to touch upon in my discussion. So let's see what we could get here. Yeah. Snehal, could we go to the next slide, please? Yeah, thank you very much. So this is one question that I have always asked myself, and I'm sure that all of us will ask ourselves, that is, who moved my primary sources? Like my primary sources were, life is so sorted, right? When you do literature, when you do study of literary text, why I feel that life is so sorted, you just have to get access to the literary text, the primary literary text. Once you got your literary text, you do your primary reading, you bring some critical perspective by reading a lot on what has been written about the literary text, or what theories are there, and then put them together and create your own interpretation, right? I know, like I'm saying it in one breath, and in half a minute. It's not that easy. People spend 3 years or 4 years to do this kind of research. But the question is that, like, we have to think of our primary sources in a different way. Like, if this is the only primary source, are there areas where you have to create your primary sources, where you have to generate your primary sources, where you collect your primary sources. So what we have when it comes to primary sources as far as literature is concerned, we have literary texts which are like out there. You just have to get access. If you have access to them, you start working on them. If they are in the written form. Now, what if the literary texts that you want to work on or you wish to work on, these are in the oral convention, that there is no written form, right? For example, if I want to I wish to work on, say, the the OV, or like a specific form of songs which is used in different parts of Maharashtra by women, especially during the festivals, and I'm interested in working on that. That is my literary text. Like, now it's not something that is out there and easily available for me. I have to come up with, I have to devise a particular way, devise certain technique. I have to create my own tools. In research they use the word instrument, right? So I have to create my own instruments to gather this, like to gather the literature and then work on it. And that is going to determine your research methodology. Like, if your literary text is not in the written form, if it is in the oral form, how do you go about doing this research? I'm fortunate enough to have come across certain research proposals in the last few years. Especially recently, there was one researcher who showed interest in working on uh, um, it's called I'm so sorry, I just lost that word. It's a kind of dialect in Banjara language, and obviously Banjara is not in the written form; it is only in the spoken form. Yeah, Gorboli. So in Gorboli, he actually proposed to work on the oral convention or oral tradition of literature in Gorboli. It's not an easy task. It's very difficult. In the first place, that the community is not, you will not find this community at one place. So you have to think of particular method. You have to use a particular technique to collect your samples from these very places. And obviously there are many issues, and one of the issues would be the ethical issue, right? You have to follow the ethics, right? Whether you are collecting any sample, you are collecting any data from that community with their permission, with their consent, or without their consent. If you are doing it without the consent of the community or the individuals, probably you will have problem in doing your research. So there are these questions that which will pop up now. Probably when you are doing research on literary texts which are out there available in the written form, there is no such problem. But when it comes to oral conventions, you cannot just simply go out and collect your samples and do your research. And that is why I think asking this question, that who moved my primary sources, is important. And we need to address this, like how exactly do I work on this. Then there are non-literary texts on which we work. Both they are available in the written form and oral form. Now, when same question, like if I am going to work on the non-literary texts which are not available in the written form, then how do I go about it? And that is where the question of biographies and autobiographies come. Right, when you are doing research on non-literary text, it could come, it could be about the narratives, but the narratives which are not fictional narratives, the narratives of the lived experiences, the narratives of real life people. So when you're working on the narratives of real life people, right, when your lived experiences, how do you exactly work on this? How do you go about doing your research, right? So do we have to generate or record the resources, is what we have to ask. And if this is the question, we have to ask the question, how exactly I do this? Like, is there any particular research approach? Is there any particular research methodology or method that can help us or help me to do this kind of research? Let's quickly now move to the next slide. I hope I'm like making sense. Please, if you want to stop me at any point and like share your quick input, you are, please, please do that. You could convey this to the moderator, Madam Snehal, and she would unmute you and ask. Yes, I think there is someone who.
Sir, you're doing fine. No issue. Please continue. We just
Thank
enjoy.
you very much, Madam Susan. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Please continue, sir. We are all ears.
Thank you. Yeah. So now, as we talked about these varied areas, the something which is very important and something probably which is not taken up as far as the study of literature is concerned or research in literature is concerned, is that empirical research in literature, right? And I'll come to that, but before that we just need to quickly talk about two very dominant ways in which we conduct empirical research. One is quantitative research and second is qualitative research. My focus is going to be more on the qualitative research and how we can bring in the qualitative research methods in doing research in literature or literary studies. So first we'll just have basic say understanding of quantitative and qualitative. We'll go to the next slide for that. Thank you. So again, as I know what I learned from the earlier exercise that we did on Mentimeter when I asked you those questions, that you are quite familiar with many concepts in research methodology, especially when it comes to qualitative research and quantitative research. So I will not dwell deep into it. I'll just touch upon it and move to the point which I am interested in exploring. So if you go by these definitions, I think things become quite clear that explaining phenomenon by collecting numerical data that are analyzed using mathematically based methods is what we call quantitative research, where the numbers determine our findings, numbers determine our conclusions, or they determine our the kind of interpretations that we draw. And the second is which is not about the numbers. It uses methods such as participant observation or case studies, which result in a narrative descriptive account of setting or practice. So that is more of a qualitative research where you are collecting your information or your data not in terms of number but in terms of language and images. So either you could do this by using interview or using interview techniques, or you could use questionnaire, or you could use observation method, or you could use what we call recording method, where you just record uninterrupted samples of the language that is actually used. So there are different ways in which you can do qualitative research and then you can do quantitative research. Obviously, there is also something called mixed approach where qualitative and quantitative can be used together. It depends on what exactly you wish to prove, right? When it comes to what we call confirmation or conformity, then we actually depend a lot on quantitative research, that you just want to create or show that X is affected by Y, or Y is important for something to happen. So when you have to create this kind of equations, or you have to create this kind of relations, probably the quantitative research is important and it makes difference, especially in terms of research in language pedagogy, language education. Those of you who are practicing teachers of a specific language and you are doing research in language, you will realize that when you are working on you want to see if a particular method or particular approach is useful or not useful, if it is effective or not effective. You can talk about it only in terms of quantitative results. Like if you can see the difference in the performance of the learner in terms of percentage, then you say yes, this is like a positive impact, or it whatever is the result, accordingly you will have your interpretation. Okay, and then as I said, qualitative, which is more about based on the language and images or signs that you collect and you analyze. So it is more subjective, it's inductive, It's based on words, and you cannot generalize the qualitative research, whereas quantitative research can be generalized. So that's a major difference. And I'm sure what I am doing right now is I'm just sort of revising some of the points which all of us are quite are quite familiar with. Yeah. Let's quickly then move to the next point where I want to really. Okay, I'm going to skip this part that is talking about variables and uh, types of variables. Uh, if the time permits, we can come back to that. But I'll just go to the next because the given time should within the given time I should focus on something that I wish to work on or share here. Snell, could we go to the next slide?
Yes.
Yeah. Next. I'm so sorry to run you through this. Yeah. Next. Yeah. One more time. Probably 2 slides. Yeah. One more slide. Okay. Yes. Thank you very much. Now this is where I actually want to draw your attention to bring your empirical research and literature, and that is where we began our discussion when we started talking about readers, when we started talking about reception. If there is any way of doing this research, or if there is any different approach to doing research when it comes to reception, whether your idea of reception theory and the kind of reception that is talked about is different. I am sure that most of us are familiar with a particular theory called reader response theory. Now we all know that when we talk about reader response theory, what we do we go out in the field and collect our data and analyze that data and then talk about it in the reader response theory? I'd like to know this response answer from you. If you can put it in the chat box. In reader response theory, do we go out in the field, collect data, analyze it, and then uh, talk about it in the research analysis? I hope the chat box is enabled so participants could respond to that.
Shashank sir? Yes, the chat boxes.
It is enabled, sir.
Thank you. Yeah, Dr. Ravindra Hazare says yes, that is what we do in reader response theory. Anyone else? Dr. Shubhra Tiwari also says that in reader response theory, we go out in the field, collect samples, and then do analysis. Okay, Madam Preeti also agrees with that. I'll ask the same question to Snell. Snell, are you familiar with reader response theory? Have you ever kind of come across this and used it?
Not really, sir.
Okay, all right, no problem. We have got difference of opinion now here. We have Amna Shamin who says that no, it's not the same. Thank you very much, Amna, for saying that. Now, I just would like to bring it to the notice of most of the participants that when we talk about reader response theory, it's not a theory where it's not a kind of practice where you go out into the field, then collect your samples and do your analysis. Certainly not. Reader response theory imagines an ideal reader and just looks at the literary text and tries to find the gaps in the literary text and sort of interpret it. So what we call reading between the lines, right? And wherever there are gaps, there are ruptures to the narrative, and we try to find those ruptures, we try to find those gaps, and the reader has the ability to interpret it. So we imagine that reader, that is the ideal reader, and how that ideal reader can fill in those gaps and come up with the interpretation. So that is what the reader response theory does. which is very different from what I am going to address now, that is reception theory, right? And here, for the first time, you will see that there is a shift. Not only, it's not the shift in the approach alone, but it's shift in your data collection. It's not going to be the text. It is going to be out there. And that is what we will see. Thank you very much, Pavandeep Kaur and also Dr. Lavanya for sharing your ideas. Yes, you're right, Professor Gohil, that it is individual reception of what someone feels, that is lacking. Or Dr. Shubhra also commented, and she says, can it be when we read the review of a book? I'll come to that. This is very interesting. It's getting interesting. So let's see that. Snell, could we have the next slide, please? Yes, thank you very much. What I would like to share with you is that, this approach to literature, that is reception approach to literature, which is very different from the response approach, was somewhere introduced in 1980s, and it was like there was this International Society for Empirical Study of Literature, which you know which had the major focus on the reception part of it. They were not only interested in the literary text, but they were interested in the what happens to literary text when it goes to the real audience, when it goes to the real reader. So the interaction between the real reader and the text, right? It's not about the ideal reader which you can imagine and you can write about it in your thesis, but it's about going out there in the field and checking, like, how the real reader responds to a particular literary text. um, I think Madam Suman Bala says that she's not able to see the slides. I don't know, but I can see the slides clearly. Probably there is, yeah, sometimes network issues. That's fine. Hopefully you will be able to see the slide. And don't worry, like even after the presentation, I'll be more than happy to share the presentation with all the participants, with the permission of the organizers, of course. Yeah. Thank you. So it was founded in 1987 and officially registered in 2010 in Netherlands, and it is aimed at advancement of empirical literary research through international and interdisciplinary cooperation. Of course, my colleague and friend Dr. Prashant Mote would be addressing the issue of interdisciplinary research, maybe in a couple of days' time. So he probably will elaborate this a little bit. I will not touch upon the interdisciplinarity in details. So this is the beginning where you can see empirical research methodology and approach being applied to the research in literature. If we go to the next slide, we will also see a few examples at how this can be done. What kind of research questions do you have when you do this kind of research? Yes. Yeah. In 1972, like this, I'm just sharing these as examples, and not necessarily these are the only works, but there are many such works which came into existence, in 1970s and 1980s. That the research was about how to implement empirical psychological research within the framework of literary studies, especially with regards to the problems of biography, creativity, and interpretation. Now, this is where scholars like Grobel, if I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but yeah, they started moving towards the empirical study, where they were looking at the interpretation, the process of creativity, the process of articulating yourself. So the focus was more on the processes. It was not on the interpretation, but it was on the processes. And because these were on the processes, it required you to interact with your informant that is out there, right? Then you also have Siegfried Schmidt's, Snail, correct me because that's German and you could pronounce it correctly better than me. Yeah. So,
Sorry,
is that right? Thank you. Yeah. So in his research in 1975, that is Empirical Science of Literature, talks about how to turn literary studies into a scientific, rationally argued discipline. Obviously, these were the missions that they had, and that's how empirical research was introduced in Siegen and Bielefeld, these universities in Germany. Yeah. Could we move to the next? Yeah, and now I'm going to just share one example of how empirical research or the reception study was conducted, by the research scholars. Like this is Moish, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, like Deutsch. So
Yes.
here the hypothesis that Moish had to do the research was the text representation resulting from literary text processing manifest more aesthetic and polyvalent qualities than usual. This is, in short, I'll tell you what. Suppose if I have a poem, right, and I change the structure of the poem and present the poem in a sentence, and I give that sentence to a reader to read, probably the sentence will be read just as a common sentence, and it will be ignored, and it will not be interpreted for its aesthetic appeal. But if you take a simple sentence and break it down into or down to say verse, like if you put the sentence in the verse form, probably people will start interpreting it, and people will start giving more interpretation. They will say, wow, this is aesthetic. For example, I did this experiment in my classroom where I put this simple sentence, that this is the lantern that I bought yesterday, and this is a simple sentence. There is nothing aesthetic about it. There is no artistic sense in creating that sentence. But I arranged that sentence in a verse form, and I just put it on the board and asked students to read it and comment on it. Then students came up with comments like, okay, so lantern here stands for, like knowledge. It's the light represents knowledge. It's like, something that you're kind of it's something that actually helps you to win over the darkness. Yesterday actually is not yesterday. Yesterday is the past, and past means, our forefathers, foremothers, right? And they guide us and they tell us, so something like that. I was amazed that how the students read, a text differently just because it is presented in a particular format. And that is exactly what Moish did in his research in 1987. And this is where I found that, like how literary studies or literature can be looked at from a reception point of view. That reception of a reader, that how reader actually responds, actual reader can respond to this. um, yes, Aisha ji, thank you for adding that comment. Yeah, uh, let's move to the next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, my computer sometimes, has the tendency of not cooperating with me. Somehow I'm not able to see the next slide. Yeah.
I have changed the slide.
I know, Snail. It's my fault. It's my computer. My computer has, as I said, tendency of acting like a child in front of the guests. So just not, budging. Fine, do whatever. I'm not going to show you the next slide. Yeah. So I think what the next slide is,
It's about narrative research in language and literature. What is narrative research? What are the types of
no,
narrative?
yeah. Before that, there is this slide where it talks about the new domains in uh, reception or in literature studies from empirical point of view, and these are like the study of light fiction, the study of reader research, and there is a word. All these words are actually German words like trivia literatur and Leseforschung, that is reader research, and also maiden Wissenschaft, that is media science. Now these are the domains where reception becomes very important, and you can approach the actual reader and do your research. So that takes reader and the context or the situation into consideration. This is what we call the reception research, that reading and interpreting on the assumption of that contextual or functional factors could be found within the text. Yeah, and okay, maybe I missed that slide somewhere, and now I'll quickly move to this is narrative research in language and literature. But before we go to this one, I just wish to know if there is any question at this point. If you have any like comment, so we could take those, and then we move to the next slide, because that is going to take at least next 10 to 15 minutes to talk about the narrative research methodology.
Right now in the chat box, I don't see any questions, but I guess someone is typing.
All
So
right. Yeah.
till that time, I guess we can continue with the next slide.
Thank you very much. Yeah. So as you can see that the next aspect that I really wanted to focus on was narrative research in language and literature. And we need to begin by asking this question is that what is narrative literature, or what is narrative research, and what are the types of narrative designs, plus what are the steps in conducting narrative research. So let us try and find answers to these questions one by one. So the very first question that we have is, what is narrative research and why are we talking about it? Is it very different from what we have discussed so far? And what the literature that is available on narrative research suggests is that narrative research is a term that subsumes a group of approaches that in turn rely on the written or spoken words or visual representation of individuals. So it's not about narrative literature. Narrative research is not about literature in the sense the literary text. It's about the way you use literary style to conduct your research. It is a method of collecting your data. It is a way of collecting your samples. That is why it is called narrative research. It's like it falls in the category of storytelling. So it's not actual stories, people telling you the stories, but it's about getting to know people's views, getting to know people's narratives, and building on those narratives and creating your own thesis. Right? So these approaches typically focus on the lives of individuals as told through their own stories. The emphasis in such approaches is on the story, typically both of what and how it is narrated, right? And you will be surprised that nowadays this type of research is absolutely in vogue, in the sense if you are planning to do your research, say in international universities, or if you want to go for interdisciplinary research, narrative method of doing research has become like very essential. It's something that we need to know, that yes, this is a way of carrying your research out. I remember recently we were like all of us are still getting the brunt of this COVID-19 situation, and we all are going through this pandemic. It's more than 1 year that we have been in this situation. So recently there was very interesting research on the narratives of certain people who suffered because of the pandemic. That lot of people who probably never got represented, that lot of people who never probably got the voice. So these people were approached, and these people's narratives were collected, and the narratives actually gave us insights into how pandemic has impacted or affected the lives of people, which would be very different from like we spending time at home watching TV, and spending time in kitchen doing experiments with food and varieties. We had a lot of people who were literally struggling, and their narratives were brought together and worked on. So for that, the researcher, and I'm very happy to share with you this my colleague, Dr. Sucharita Sarkar, who recently published her research article on this in Routledge, anthology. It was an amazing piece of work where how exactly she used this technique or this particular method called narrative research method. There is an advanced version of this which is called ethno narrative methodology. So we'll come to that a little later, but the beginning of ethno narrative methodology or method is basically in the narrative research, and how exactly narrative research can be useful in the study of literature or in the study of language is something that we can explore for sure. So what you see is that the stories of lived experiences are co-constructed and negotiated between the people involved as a means of capturing complex, multi-layered, and nuanced understandings of the work, so that we can learn from it. Right. So basic purpose is obviously to learn from what the kind of data that we are collecting, from the experiences that we are collecting in the form of narratives. This presentation will address at least some part of this, like relations, methods, and collaborations. And this also, what we can see is that it brings together research. Like it can be seen as a research method, but it can also be seen as a phenomenon in itself. Could we move to the next slide, please? Yeah. So as far as the types of narrative designs here, as far as research narrative research approach is concerned, that designs that are basically individual experiences, collecting individual stories, chronology of the experiences. Then sometimes there is also restoring, in the sense the kind of story that has been told, maybe it's in bits and pieces and you have to put the things together. So it's like a restoring. Then coding for themes, contexts, or settings, and focus, and working on the collaborative or collaborating with participants. Now, these are the aspects that you have to take into consideration while you are carrying out a research project which is based on narrative research methodology. Yeah. What I would like to ask you is that how many of us are familiar with a particular project that is going on? It has been undertaken by, or it has been supported by Tata Trust, and this project is called 1947 Archives. Is there anyone who has heard of this particular project? You can just put it in the chat box if you have heard of this 1947 Archives project. And the question, like, why I'm asking you, why am I referring to this? Okay, Dr. Shalini Mathur says that she hasn't, but it's something that is right now quite making rounds. It's making its presence even in the academics. It's a very important piece of research that you can see, which has used narrative research method in carrying out this kind of project. So here, what you do is that you actually reach out to the individuals, you interview them, you talk with them, you probably spend more time with them. It's not like just going there once and then talking with the people, but it's like spending time with them, probably a month's time, and then collecting their stories, like bringing their stories to your archives and working on those stories. The purpose could be creating archives of those narratives which did not exist earlier, or which probably could not exist because the dominant narratives did not allow that kind of space for such things. So this 1947 Archives is one example how this is done. Recently, we like at the University of Mumbai, we conducted one international conference at Indo-Canadian Studies Center, and there was a fantastic presentation on the research carried out by a professor in I think McMaster University. And this research was they called it the archiving memories, like how you archive the memories of a particular incidents. For example, in India, 1947 was a major, like partition was a major, event that left its impact on not only that particular generation, for the generations to come. And so they archived, these by contacting people, by interviewing people. Yes, Dr. Durbadal Datta has raised hand. I would be happy to get comments from. Yes, please. If you could unmute and share your comments. Yes.
You can unmute yourself now.
Is it by mistake? There is always a.
Sir, I am attached to Bengal Partition Repository by Netaji Subhash Open University.
Great.
And it's a project where we have collected memories of people affected by partition.
Great.
And it's the repository has been opened, and we have collected 350 persons' memory regarding experience during and after partition till death.
Wow, that's a commendable work, Dr. Datta.
We have done it, sir.
Super. Exactly. So precisely that was the point. Like, this kind of research is now an upcoming area, that where we could now create archives of memories, right? Memories that are related to an incidents that has really impacted not only the past but the present, and might also continue to impact the future. As I was referring to this research by the professor from McMaster University, she worked on the Kanishka bombing in Canada, and like the memories which are associated with Kanishka bombing. And this was something, later on it became a kind of national project, and it attracted the attention not only of the students but of scholars and researchers in this area. So I guess this is one area that we need to explore as teachers of literature, going a little out of box. I do not downplay the study of literary text, but we need to go a little out of that frame of studying and seeing that what are the different possibilities of doing literature, engaging with literature. And that's why I use the word fictional narratives and non-fictional narratives. So this is where we have non-fictional narratives, where we can create archives, right, by collecting such samples and then making it available for the future generations to do the research on. Otherwise we have, we will only hear this, that right now we don't have anything available to talk about the past, or those experiences. It's just gone, right? We can only imagine, right? And therefore we could focus on narrative research and like kind of make a major contribution. Shall we move to the next slide, please? Yeah, thank you. I know we are almost towards the end of the session. I'll be very quick. Another slide. I think I did talk about types of narrative designs. Yeah, this is what I mentioned about the 1947 archives, which mainly focuses on the India-Pakistan partition. But thank you very much, Dr. Datta, for bringing in the issue of Bengal partition, and how in the West Bengal a lot of work is going on in terms of archiving the memories of lived experiences. So that's a commendable job, and we need to do this. We need to do it more often and engage ourselves in this kind of study. So collecting the story from the individual, restoring or retelling the individual story, because the everyone is not a storyteller, so you have to kind of fill in as a your role is that of a facilitator, right? Then you have to collaborate with the participant storyteller. You have to write the story about the participants' experiences and validate the accuracy of the report, because it's very important. You should not manipulate the the story. It shouldn't become your story. So how this has to be done is what you will learn in narrative research methodology. Yeah, could we go to the next slide, please? Yes. Now I just have this activity for you again. Can you think of possible areas of research with this particular method that I just mentioned, narrative methodology, or you could also call it ethno-narrative methodology? Having done this kind of discussion, if you can do this, we just have to go to this particular slide. Yes, certainly, Professor Gohil, I'll share the links for articles on research, narrative research. But at present, let's do this menti.com activity. Snell, shall I paste the link?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Give me just 1 minute.
Sir, I have already posted the link in the chat box.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Shashank sir. Yeah. Okay, so I will request now the participants to visit menti.com, this particular link, and share their ideas. Like what could be possible areas of research with this method, that is narrative method of conducting research. And I'll request Nehal to allow me to share my screen so
Sure.
that we could also see the results.
Yes, I have done it.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Let me first enable so people are able to respond to this particular slide. Great. Deconstructing the narrative of merit in India. Wow. Let me share the screen. I hope the screen is visible, Snehal.
Yes, sir. Please.
Great. Thank you. Now we are getting these responses. Trauma literature, folk studies, dream of consciousness. Okay, I think the participant can explain that better. Kerala flood of 2019, perhaps. Probably, the memories of Kerala flood in 2019 are deeper, and maybe they have like kind of left people with very, like what you say, deep scars. Then certainly, such memories can be archived, and you can have research on that. In current situation in Gaza, Israel, thank you. Folk studies, fantastic. Those of you who are really interested in folk studies, they can do a Google search and find that in Nehu, that is Northeastern Hills University, Shillong, a lot of research is going on folk studies, and especially they are using ethno-narrative methodology to carry out this research. I have a couple of colleagues in that university, that is Rosie Chamling and Dr. Rosie Chamling and Professor Karmo Flong, Desmond Kamuflong, who have been doing a lot of research on this particular area. Now we can actually look at our own, regions and see if we can explore this. Someone has also talked about study of narrative journalism or interviews. Trauma literature has been repeated, so it means people are thinking of this. Corona crisis, yes. Narrative research method is organizing the talk from different sources of people and participants. That's fine. But yeah, if we could also see some more. And folk literature is something that pops up time and again. Feminine consciousness in English novels. I will ask this question to one or two of you who have suggested these topics. Hindus living in Pakistan. That's again an area that you could really explore and find the narratives and archive those narratives, so that it becomes a kind of reference for the future and also the present researchers to work on. So the very act of archiving is very important, and I think narrative research can contribute a lot in archiving this. Superb responses, life histories, yes. Especially recently, I remember that there is this one NGO called Humsafar Trust, which works for the sexual health of men. Mainly, it focuses on LGBTQ community, And it actually started a project called Bolo Project, where it started interviewing or interacting with the individuals, be it transgender or lesbian or gay, and putting these works together in the digital archives and making these digital archives available. So far no one was talking about it. So far no one was, like, there was a hush hush. So far it was treated as like behind the closet, but now it's coming out in the front and it's available for you to hear what these narratives talk about certain experiences. And this has really contributed a lot, not only in social sense of bringing about change, but also something that is available now for people to work on. Superb. I'm really happy that you have at least 30 people have responded to it very spontaneously. I'll stop sharing the screen and come back to our discussion, which we are going to close now. Yeah, Snehal, could we just go back to the presentation, and I'll finish in next 3 minutes. I know it's we are very close to that, and then take, if at all the time permits, we could take questions.
Yes, sir. I have shared the screen as soon as possible.
Yeah, thank you. So very close to the narrative research method is the ethnographic research, and the common thing and the common platform there is people. You go out in the community, you spend time there, you observe, you interact, you note down things. You don't change people. You don't want to do experiments with people here. Here you are there only to gain knowledge. And so you gain knowledge only if you have the best methods and best techniques of collecting the data. So how do you do that? Through observation. How do you do it? Through interviews. How do you do it? Through recording their speeches. So that is the ethnographic research, which actually demands you to have um, you know better interaction with a particular cultural group. And this would be useful, not it has nothing to do with, or it is not only restricted what we so call anthropological research or social research. In subjects like language teaching, you can have ethnographic research, where your interaction is with teachers, your interaction is with students, right? For example, now we have online learning going on, and I would like to know through ethnographic research that how exactly the teachers of language deal with, or teachers of literature deal with online mode of teaching. What are their experiences? What are their problems? What are their suggestions, ideas? This would be possible only when I interact with the community of teachers and do observation and note down things, which will give me insights. And it might also help me to break certain myths about online teaching, right? So this could be a possible area. And now we will move to the last one. Thank you very much. I will close this. Yeah, if you could just move to the the next slide. I know I'm rushing, and yeah, I think the next slide is about ethno-narrator, right?
No, sir. The next slide is related to data collection.
Yeah. Oh, all right. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. So these are the possible, ways of collecting your data. That is observation, field notes, interviews, and recordings. I'll skip this part and move to the last slide and close the session. That is a few areas for exploration in ELT. I will not use the word ELT. I'll simply say language teaching. Since there are also teachers of German and French and probably other subjects like other languages. So what could be the possible way of engaging in research with such methodologies? That is student perspectives on lecture comprehension, or cross-cultural expectation on parents' involvement in school or college. College, I don't know if parents are really involved, but at school level, parents are definitely involved. Experiences of learners in a specific language as a second or foreign language, or the relationship of gender and language learning, the effects of computer on foreign language classroom, or classroom interactions, or oral presentations in graduate seminars, or what we call student seminars. These are just a few areas which you can explore by using this particular approach or this particular method, and engage in research on language and literature, especially in language education. Okay, and now we move to the last, final. Thank you. Okay, I'll skip this ethno-narrative approach. These are just a few references which I will share, and I'll add a few more references to this, and I'll share the presentation with the organizers so that it is available for the participants.
Sure.
So thank you very much. Now over to you, Snehal. If there is any time for the audience to grill me, if there are any questions, I would be more than happy to take the questions, though I don't guarantee very solid answers. Yeah, but still I'll be happy to respond to that.
Miss Kavita Verma Rathod has raised her hand.
Yes.
Actually, she has asked the question, but let me just check whether she's going to ask the same question or not.
Good afternoon, sir. Am I audible? Can you hear me?
Yes, very much.
Yeah.
Good morning.
Thank you so much, sir, because the presentation has been so engrossing right from the beginning to the end. And now I'll ask my question. So just now you mentioned that experiences of teachers taking up this online teaching, especially during this pandemic times. Can this be a topic for narrative research? This is one question. And earlier I have put it in the chat. I said in ELT research, can we apply both quantitative as well as qualitative methods?
Okay, I have assertive and very positive answers to this. Yes, like to your first question, of course you can engage in narrative research methodology, like engage in research on the experiences during the pandemic by using narrative methodology. And as far as the second topic that you mentioned, that in ELT, both are possible. Like you can have qualitative as well as quantitative methods being used. I mentioned, while I was talking about qualitative and quantitative, I also said there is something called mixed approach. So that is where you can, but we need to justify, you need to justify, you need to have a specific question which will be answered by a quantitative approach, and there will be a question which will be answered by a qualitative approach. Right? So my answer to that is yes.
Thank you so much, sir.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you for asking that question. It was very thoughtful.
Thank you, sir.
Only two more people will be allowed to grill, sir. Running out of time, so please excuse us. Only two people can go. Two more people can go.
Yes. So I will take the first question from Kshitija Tashi, madam. She is asking, can you please explain narrative research in language, how to use this method in language?
Okay, I'll cut that long story short, Kshitija, for you. When we say using narrative method in language, especially first you have to ask this question, like, what is your research problem? What is your research question? If my research problem is related to, say, the struggle of a specific speaker or speaker community with a particular language, how they feel, how they think about that language, or the association as far as the identity is concerned. If this, I'm just giving an example, if this is my question, then I can create my narrative research design where I could conduct these interviews, interact with those people, take their narratives, and to understand how exactly they feel about a specific language and the identity associated with it. Right? So ultimately, it has to begin with this question, like, what is my research problem? What is my research question? And if my research question finds its answer in the way people think about a particular language or identity, then I can engage in narrative, or I can use narrative methodology in order to carry out my research. In a very short time, I mean, I can elaborate only this much, but I'll be more than happy to respond to your question in more elaborate way, maybe through an email, if that is required. Yeah, but thank you for asking me that question, Kshitija.
All right, so our next question is from Aisha K. Madam. She is saying narratives are often constructed by those in power. So, how does one safeguard from falling into this trap while using the reception theory to analyze social problems?
That's a very brilliant question, I must say. That Ayusha ji, thank you very much for asking that question in the first place. And I entirely agree with you that there is always a kind of power equation as far as narrative is concerned, and who actually has the right to, in fact, create the narrative or preserve the narrative. I think as academics and academicians, it becomes our responsibility to ensure that we follow certain ethical practices when it comes to narratives being represented, right? And until and unless we ourselves, make sure that the narratives which have been presented, the narratives which we have collected, are not what you call tampered with. They are not manipulated. They are not manufactured. Um, I think there is a fair chance that narratives get. That probably we all know that if we could make our research, our findings available and transparent, there is a possibility that if there is something wrong with the narrative presentation, there could be questions, there could be it could be challenged, and then the researchers would make sure that they do not really tamper with the kind of narratives that they have collected. But then I do believe that you have posed a very important question, and it's the conscience of the researchers. And if we can also create a system that allows us to exercise this, to kind of have such kind of exercise as far as the narrative research is concerned, or archiving research is concerned. I don't know if I have responded to your question or answered your question satisfactorily, but even like that's what I could immediately say. But if you have any response to this, if you wish to add to this, I will be more than happy, only if the time permits and the organizers permit. Aisha ji.
Next.
Yes, sir. So I can see that the chat box is flooded with thank you, sir. It was very wonderful session, and it seems that they really got so much information from this. They're saying that it was very useful for the PhD scholars and all. So yes, we do agree that it was a wonderful session, and yes, we got to know a lot more information which we actually needed. So thank you so much once again, sir, for this enriching information and all. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for giving me this, very rare opportunity to interact with wise heads on young shoulders. It was brilliant experience, and the way. Thanks to you, Snehal, for the way you ensure that it really runs very smooth. I appreciate even the technical support team, especially. I'm sorry,
Shashank.
Shashank, sir. Yeah, Shashank. Thank you very much for making my life easier on screen, and also thanks to, I already said, but I repeat, my sincere thanks to Dr. Manjiri Vaidya, the head and also the convener of FDP, and the co-convener Dr. Swati Bise, for coordinating and making sure that I don't really like completely go off the track. Thank you. Thank you very much. Madam Susan, thanks a lot for cheering me up throughout the session.
Sir, I really didn't know when we hit 12 o'clock. Honestly, I have to be explicitly honest here. Really, I did not realize that it is 12, and I had to, force myself to uh, believe that we are coming to the end. It was a stupendous session. God bless you. It was really wonderful, and really it was. I even wanted to take a small break to drink something, but I didn't, because it was so very engaging, as the participants said. And these words are really from the bottom of the heart, full of gratification for your session, sir. It was beautiful. We promise you we'll trouble you again. and we are taking it for believing that we are welcome.
Thank you very much. You're most welcome.
We are inviting our
I had muted myself, so probably I didn't get heard. Yeah.
I said, did you hear what I said, sir?
I heard, and I said you're most welcome to like cash in on me anytime. It will always be a pleasure because these platforms are very important to interact with our colleagues, our fraternity, and we learn from each other. I'm so happy that people were so vibrant with their responses. They were so alert. They made actually the session digestible. Otherwise, I would have imagined this session as a graveyard session before lunch.
So there's another compliment I can't help but spelling it out. The ease with which you speak, it's not everybody's cup of tea. We all are people from most of us are from the language fraternity, but then the ease and the command over the language is impeccable. You have a superb command and it comes so easily. It's not everybody's forte. So that's a huge, what to say, achievement. And we noted that, we appreciated that, we enjoyed that. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Manjuri ma'am would like to
Sachin,
add to it.
yes, Sachin sir, thank you so much. We would, as Susan ma'am said, we would love to have you on the campus once we will be normal. Corona will allow us to meet. And here I want to appreciate the participants also.
Yes.
For last 5 days, they are so interactive. They are asking questions. They are participating in interesting way. So I would like to thank them too. Keep this enthusiasm till end.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vaidya.
What are the reasons for making it happen, sir? You, the eminent speakers, with your research methodology, types, methods, data analysis, concept research, everything. I have got 2 pages write-ups. So it's a volley of information coming our way. Thank you so much, sir.
Okay,
so yes, sir.
With your permission, like I would share my presentation and also a few references for the participants. There are a few articles and also very important books that they could refer to. Fortunately, I have them in the PDF form, so I could share it with Dr. Swati Bise. And if she could just ensure that these books and the references reach our participants. It was wonderful talking and interacting with all the participants and with all the colleagues. So once again, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Stay blessed.
Thank
and to all the participants, thank you, Roshali, for the wonderful job of making sir feel at home. And thank you, ma'am. So this is all we can do to appreciate you.
I'm sorry to disturb you. This is Snehal, not Rushali.
Oh, sorry. Snehal. Okay. So the reason is, sir. Don't blame me.
Okay, I take it as a compliment.
Compliment, a huge compliment coming your way. Okay, thank you so much. So participants, and yes, sir. Yes,
may
sir.
I, with your kind permission, then leave the meeting?
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I wish all the best to all the participants and have a wonderful day. Stay safe.
Thank you. Thank you on their behalf. Thank you, sir. Dear participants, as sir corrected, dear colleagues, please be with us, and after lunch we rejoin at 2 o'clock for yet another session with the ASL. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Come on.